This is the hard part. And it's just sad, you know what I mean? But like, a part of me died that day that I found out. Hi my loves, welcome back to my channel. My name is gisleniq if this is your first time here. So as you guys can see from the title, today's video is going to be a little bit heavier than my normal videos. It's going to be a video on the day that I found out that my dad had passed away. I just want to get a little bit more personal here. I want you guys to kind of get to know me a little bit more and kind of just get a little bit of behind the scenes of what's made me the person that I am. And that is definitely one of the things that really shaped me and affected my childhood and played a big impact in the person that I am today. And I feel like it could be a little bit of a healing moment for me as well. So if you guys want to hear this story time, then go ahead and keep watching. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. So I am going to be doing my makeup while I do the story time, and I may talk through it, but I know how I am. I probably will talk and then forget to say anything, so I'll make sure to link everything that I use down below in the description. So I don't know if I ever mentioned on my channel that my dad had passed away, but my dad did pass away on August 25th 2009, so it's been quite some time now. So I was 14 years old at the time. My birthday is in March. It's actually March 9th, so it was literally like just a few days before my birthday that he passed away. So I was 14 turning 15. So at the time I was in middle school and I was going to a program through Columbia University. So after I would get out of school, I would go to this building where I would have like an after school program, which was just like this program where you would go and you would get all your homework done and you would get assistance from the tutors that were there. And on this day there was this like event where the parents had to come with the kids to Columbia because they were going to speak. You know, they were really preparing us for us to go off to high school. So I didn't have a cell phone at the time. My mom was one of those parents who kind of waited out as long as possible to get me a phone. So the only person that had a phone was my older brother and obviously my mom, and my brother is 5 years older than me. So that morning, because she knew that I was gonna have to go to the after school program and then go over to Columbia to meet her, she was like, hey, take your brother's phone today so that way you can call me once you're out of the after school program and then we can meet up at Columbia. So me being a 14-year-old little girl, you know, I was so excited. I was like, ooh, I'm so cool. I got my brother's razor. If you guys know, like the razors back then were like the shit. It was like the equivalent of an iPhone. It was that and the Sidekick. But my brother had the razor. Actually, I don't even know if the Sidekick had came out yet. And if you guys don't know what the razor is, I'm just aging myself. But yeah, so I was like super excited. I was like, yeah, I'm that girl. Like, I'm gonna be having a phone today. So I left my school and then I went over to my after school program. And in the after school program, you would have to get there and it wouldn't start until a specific time. So you would basically just kind of stand outside in line with all the other kids until it was time for you to go in. So I remember standing outside of the after school program and I was just waiting online for them to, you know, open the door so we could go in. And then my brother got a call, but I had his cell phone from one of our aunts, and so this is my dad's sister. And something else that I need to mention that I didn't mention is my parents were already separated, so at no point during my life did I ever live with like my mom and my dad, because my parents were already separated before I was even born. And then they kind of, you know, they had a little bit of a slip up, and then I was born, and then, you know, they got together while my mom was pregnant, and then like shortly after they separated. So at no point did I ever live with my parents together, and I was always closer to my mom's side of the family because that was the parent that I lived with. So it was a little odd that my aunt was calling my brother, but I didn't think it was that odd because she was one of his siblings that we were actually close to. So I was just like, whatever. So I ended up picking up the call and I was like, hey, Sion Tia. That's how we greet our like aunts and uncles. So I was just like, oh, oh, hi, Tia, how are you? And she was like, hi, how are you? And then she was like, oh, like, where's your mom? And I was like, oh, she's still at work. Like, I'm at my after school program. And she was like, oh, okay. And then she was like, where's Lennon? That's my brother. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I'm sure he's probably in class or something. Because I believe my brother was in college at this point. So I was just like, oh, I don't know. He's probably in class. And then she was like, oh, well, have your mom call me as soon as possible. And again, I'm not thinking anything of it. I'm just like, okay. I'm just sitting here thinking I'm so cool. I was like, not only do you have my brother's phone, but somebody's calling me. Like, I look like, you know, I'm important kind of thing. So I didn't think anything of it. I was just like, okay, whatever. Like, I'll let her know. So I go into my after school program. I do my homework as usual. Like, I wasn't thinking anything of it. So after the after school program, I went over to Colombia so we could do the little like conference that they were doing. I can't even remember exactly what it was, but yeah, so met up with my mom, we had the conference, and then we got out. It was already late at this point. It was already like nighttime because I remember it being dark, and we're getting out and me and my mom are just talking, you know, whatever, walking to the train. And then my mom gets a call to her cell phone. And this is the hard part. So my mom gets a phone call, and, you know, she's talking on the phone. And like I said, we're just like continuing walking to the train, and she gets this call. And at this time, I had no idea like who was calling her. So I just remember we were walking to the train, and if you've ever been to Columbia University, there's the entrance to the campus, and right outside the entrance of the campus, depending what side you're on, that's where the 1 train is. And we lived on the 1 train line, so we were walking over to the 1 train, and so there was the entrance, the main entrance to the 1 train, and then there was another entrance a little bit further back, but that one, it wasn't an entrance, it was just an exit. So we were a little bit closer to that. So in between the exit to the 1 train and the entrance to the 1 train, there's this like long walkway, and it's just like a really long wall. And I'm only mentioning this because I feel like for me it was significant in the story. And so my mom gets this call, and you know, she's on the phone, she's talking to this person unbeknownst to me at this point, and then all of a sudden my mom literally just like falls to the wall. And I was so like taken aback, and I was so confused, and I was just like, Ma, what's wrong? Like, I was like, what's wrong? And at this exact moment, there was this girl and her grandmother who were also in the program, and the grandmother would like often talk to my mom when they were like waiting for us after program and stuff. So, you know, they had kind of built a little bit of a relationship. So they just so happened to be kind of walking and passing us. So I just remember the grandmother and girl that I was in the program with like ran over to us, and the grandmother was like, hey, what's wrong? Like, are you okay? And my mom just like could not really speak for like a few moments. And then I think eventually my mom kind of realized that she had been in this state, and so she just kind of like got up. She was like, no, I'm fine. And then she was still on the phone, and then she like told whoever she was on the phone with, she was like, I'll talk to you later, I'll call you back. And so she told the grandmother and the girl that I was in the program with, she was like, oh no, I'm fine, like don't worry about it. And she was like, it's okay. And they were like, are you sure? And she was like, yeah, no, I'm fine, it's fine. So I'm shook at this point, like I'm scared, because I'm like, what is going on? Like, what is happening right now? And so we walk over to the train, and we're just like standing in the train, and I keep asking my mom, I'm like, what's wrong? Like, what happened? And she was like, I'll tell you when we get home. So at this point, I'm like getting emotional, because I'm like, what's like, you know, I start crying, and I was like, Mom, like, what's wrong? You know what I mean? Literally in this exact tone, I'm sure. And she just like refuses to tell me what's going on. So I'm just like, okay, whatever. Like, obviously she's not gonna tell me. And so then I guess to like diffuse the like awkwardness, she started to make conversation. So she's like, oh, did you finish your homework? whatever. She's just like making casual conversations like we would usually talk about when we were on our way back home from school. And I was just like, yeah, I did most of it, you know, but I still have, you know, some homework left to do, whatever. And she was like, okay. And she was like, all right. And then I think I can't 100% remember, but I feel like I asked her again. I was like, Ma, like, what's going on? And she was like, we'll talk about it when we get home. And she's like, so I can talk about it to you and your brother. So immediately when she said, like, talk to me and my brother, I was kind of like, okay, like, what do you have to talk to me and my brother about? You know what I mean? So the train finally gets here and we get on the train. And honestly, it was probably like the longest train ride I've ever been on in my whole life, because I was just like, you know, I just had this anticipation where I was just like, what is going on? But again, I'm not thinking anything of it. Like, I'm a 14-year-old kid. I didn't know anything about anything in reality. You know what I mean? Like, my mom really sheltered me and my brother, so I was very unaware of a lot of things. So we finally get back home. So then she goes and she gets my brother and she's like, hey, come to the living room. Like, you and gisleniq sit on the couch. I have something to tell you guys. So he sits on the couch and I'm already sitting on the couch. And then he kind of looks at me like confused, like, what's going on? So we're both sitting there. And then she's like, your Aunt Belkis called to inform me that your dad passed away in a car accident. And it came as such a shock because, like, that was literally the last thing that we were expecting. And I just remember my brother literally like falling off the couch onto his knees. And I think that, alongside obviously finding out that he had passed away, it was like all just, it was just such a surreal moment. I was just like, there's no way this is going on right now. Like, there's just no way. I'm literally ruining my makeup. All right, I'm back. Sorry, I needed a little bit of a moment to gather myself and fix my face because my under eyes were just like super patchy, even though I don't feel like I did the best job, but it's okay. All right, so like I said, my brother had like fallen to his knees, and you know, it was just like crazy to see him react like that because I had never seen that much emotion come from out of him. And it was just like, it was just so many emotions and so many things going on at once. Like, it was me seeing my mom cry, which was probably one of the first times I had ever seen her cry. Like I said, my mom's a super strong woman. She doesn't really cry, or at least she doesn't really cry in public much. So it was never something that I had really seen. And then obviously finding out that my dad had passed away, it was like, it just came at such a shock. And then to hear that he had died from a car accident, it was like crazy because my dad was such a good driver. So it was literally like the last thing that I think anybody would have expected from him. Like, I don't think anybody would have expected him to die in a car. So yeah, so that was so hard, like such a core memory for me. I literally, like, I can close my eyes and literally remember that moment, the couch, the setup. Like, it was just, it's just so crazy how traumatic moments can kind of like stick to you. But even though in the same breath, I feel like there's definitely bits and pieces that I feel like have left me, and I don't know if it's for the same reason, where it's just kind of like I've kind of tried to block some of that stuff out. Basically, my mom had told me that the person who she was on the phone with when she had fallen was my aunt. She had called her to let her know that my dad had gotten into a car accident on the New Jersey Garden State Parkway. So basically, my dad had been driving on that highway, and somebody had called and reported that a car had ran off the road, and I'll kind of get into it a little bit. And then an ambulance came and took my dad to the hospital, and then by the time that he got to the hospital, he had already died. So just to kind of get into a little bit of what happened, so there is no 100% because obviously nobody was there. So what we all believe is that my dad had basically fallen asleep at the wheel, And you know when you fall asleep and you're trying to like get comfortable and you just like kind of stretch out, it seems like that's what he did. He kind of stretched out, and he just so happened to stretch out and hit the gas in a moment in the highway where there was no railing or fence or whatever, or no wall to kind of block him from going into the woods or going into the trees. And so basically that's what we think. He just kind of like stretched out, and then he accelerated off of the highway, and then he hit a tree and his car kind of spun, and then the tree ended up falling on top of him. And then obviously, you know, the rest is history. So by the time he got to the hospital, he was already pronounced deceased. And so my aunt and his brother-in-law were at the hospital, you know, basically identifying the body, and it was him. And so she was basically calling my mom to confirm that my dad had died, because I guess when she had called my brother, aka me, trying to get in contact with my mom, by that point my dad hadn't passed away yet. They had just reported that he had gotten into the accident. So by the time that my aunt was able to get in contact with my mom, it was basically just to let her know that he had passed away. At this point, my mom had no idea about what was going on. Like, she had no communication with her. I think my aunt had called her, but again, my mom was just go from going to work to then meet me at the meeting, and then we were obviously in the meeting for a couple hours. So my mom just had no idea. And yeah, that's how she got the news. And obviously it makes sense why she reacted like that, because she had no idea what was coming. Like, she had no idea what news she was gonna get on the other end of that call. So then after we found out, obviously, like, I feel like it's pretty typical when people find out that somebody dies, like, the calls started coming in. My mom ended up telling my aunt and one of my uncles, and so they came over shortly after, and you know, they were just there with us while we were, you know, just kind of processing, because I don't even want to say grieving, because to be completely honest with you, I thought it was a joke. I genuinely thought it was a joke, and I really thought that it was a joke for a few months. Like, I really thought my dad was gonna jump out the casket and be like, ha, gotcha, you know what I mean? Like, which is so crazy to even think about. Like, what? Like, why do you even think that? I just could not accept the fact that he had died. Like, there was just, I just couldn't accept it. So that whole night, like, we just kept getting calls, and people kept calling and wanting to speak to us and, you know, offer them condolences. And I just remember talking to like one of my cousins, and she was like, I'm so sorry, like, I'm so sorry. And I was just like, I just want my dad back. Like, I just want my dad back. Like, I don't want anybody calling me and apologizing, or I don't want anybody calling and saying sorry. Like, I just want him here. Like, I just want him to come back. And yeah, it was such a hard day. It's just like so unexpected, and I feel like that's what made it that much harder, because again, none of us expected that to happen. And so that whole night, like, they were trying to like get me to eat, and I just like, I had no appetite. I was like, I'm not hungry, like, I don't want to eat anything. And they were just trying to get me to eat bread. I just remember them trying to get me to eat this like Costco bread, and my aunt was like, no, you have to eat, you have to eat. And I was just like, I'm just not hungry. And they were like, no, you have to. So I just remember like them force feeding me some like tea and bread. It was such a long night. I feel like we didn't end up going to bed until super late. And then the craziest thing about it was, a few hours after my mom had told us and my aunt and my uncle had came over, we got a knock on the door, and it was the police. And we were like, what? Like, what's going on? And they were just like, oh, like, we're just coming because there was a burglary in the apartment right across from you guys. Like, do you guys know anything? And we were just like, no. My aunt was just like, no, like, their dad actually just passed away, we just found out. They were like, oh my god, like, we're so sorry to hear that, like, you know, offered their condolences and everything. Yeah, so eventually, I want to say it was maybe like 2 a.m. at this point. They were kind of like, okay, like, we all need to go to bed, because, you know, my mom had to go to work the next day. Like, my mom, she didn't have the luxuries of being like, oh, I'm just gonna call out and sit at home and grieve this loss. she didn't have that luxury. Like, she had to go to work because she didn't have time off like that, and she needed to pay the bills because she was a single mom. And so just like she had to go to work, I had to go to school the next day. So just imagine, like, fresh off of finding out that my dad died, and I'm having to wake up, you know, after getting like a few hours of sleep, because obviously, you know, everybody just kept ringing us, because I guess as the news started to come out slowly, like more and more people started calling my mom to offer their condolences and just to like check up on how we were doing. So the calls just continued and continued. So I just remember my mom dropping me off at the corner of my school, and my school was in the middle of the block. So I just remember walking over to the playground, because that's where we would kind of all hang out before it was time to go in. And so I just remember going to the playground, and there was a few of my friends, and they were there, and they were just like playing, and we were all like super close, and every time we would see each other, we would like hug each other and like, you know, greet each other. And I just remember this one kid, I went over to him, and he was like, "Hey, gisleniq," like super excited. And I was always like in such a great mood. Like at this point in my life, like I was always in a good mood. I was always happy. I never really had bad days. Like I was just like that super like optimistic, happy person. And it's making me emotional because I feel like a part of me died that day that I found out. And it's just sad, you know what I mean? To like, I'm almost mourning that little girl, because I feel like after, obviously, I found out that my dad had passed away, I felt like I had to really grow up, because I learned about this thing that is like a really normal human thing. Like obviously people die, but I had never had anybody close to me die. And then to have a parent die is like a completely different ballgame. It's always hard to lose a parent, but just imagine losing a parent at such a young age. It's like really, really tough. But yeah, so I just remember him like coming up to me and like giving me a hug and being like super excited. And I just didn't meet him with the same excitement. And he was just like, "What's wrong?" And he was like, "Gisleniq, what's wrong?" And then I literally just started like bawling my eyes out. And like everybody who was around was just like, "Whoa, what's going on? What's going on?" And I just remember when my friends had like taken me into the school and like taking me to the main office, and I was really cool with like all of the ladies who worked in the main office, and I was just like crying, and everybody was just like, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And I was just like, you know, I obviously told them, I was like, "My dad died last night." And then I remember going to my first class, which I want to say was my math class, and I just remember sitting in that class and trying so hard to concentrate, and it was like there was somebody talking in the background, but my mind was everywhere but paying attention to like what the teacher was saying. So after that class happened, I went over to the office again, and I was just like, I can't, like I just can't do this. Like, can you guys call my mom, whatever? And so then they called my mom, and my mom was just like, "I can't go get her, like I need to work." And there was nobody who could get me, like there was nobody who could take me out of school and spend the day with me. So then there was one of the ladies who worked at the office, and she was like super young. I remember her, she was probably like in her like 20s or like mid-20s, and she was so nice, and she took a liking to me. And so, you know, every morning I would go to her, and me and her would like talk, you know what I mean? In between classes, I would go talk to her. She was like super nice. So then they kind of decided, they were like, "Okay, like you don't have to go to class. Obviously your mom can't come get you, so you're just gonna stay with us," kind of thing. And so she ended up taking me downstairs, and there was this like West Market supermarket. And so she was like, "I'm gonna go buy lunch, like you come with me." So I went over to the Westmart supermarket with her, and she like let me buy this like really big chocolate chip cookie. And it's just so crazy how like things like that you remember, you know what I mean? But I just felt like it was such a like significant moment, and I was just so grateful to her and to all the staff, because they you know, just treated me with so much care and empathy. Basically just spent the day in like the office with all of the ladies in the office and with one of the teachers who was just like super nice, and she just gave me like these books to like color on and stuff. And then eventually obviously my mom came and picked me up. All right, so basically to kind of wrap up me finding out that my dad had passed away and his funeral and everything. So my dad passed away on a Wednesday, and then Thursday I went to school like I mentioned. Friday I didn't go to school. I'm guessing my mom was able to the day off. He obviously went to work and told them what had happened, and so she was able to get Friday off. Friday was a day that everybody kind of got together and started to plan the funeral, because the funeral was on the following Monday. So Friday everybody got together, planned the funeral, and then Saturday my mom and I went to go get our hair done, so obviously we could look presentable for the funeral. And then Sunday, I remember just being in Soho, like going up and down all the stores trying to find like something for me to wear that was obviously all black, that was like appropriate for the funeral, being the daughter of the deceased. And so yeah, I just remember being in Soho, like running up and down a bunch of different stores, and also preparing to fly to DR because my dad had a funeral here in the US, and then he also had a funeral in the Dominican Republic, which is where he is now buried. So then Monday was his funeral, and I just remember it was a snowstorm. Like it was one of the worst snowstorms that we've had here in New York in like history, where they literally shut down schools, like roads were shut down. Like it was such a bad snowstorm. And like, just so you guys know, New York, we don't shut down schools when it snows. Like it snows, I mean back then it snowed a lot more than it does now, but you know, we're not like some states where it snows and they're like, okay, we're gonna shut down schools. Like that doesn't happen here. So for them to have shut down schools, that's how you know it was like a really bad snowstorm. But I say that to say that even though the weather was so bad, the turnout for my dad's funeral was crazy. Like there was so many people there. His funeral was, I believe, from like, I want to say 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And when I tell you that there was people there from before we even got there, like by the time that me, my mom, and my brother got there were already people there. And I remember this specifically because I remember my cousin Jonathan being there. And this is another like kind of core memory. I remember my cousin being there, and I hadn't seen my dad yet, and my mom went up to see him first, and it was an open casket. And then I was like super nervous to go see him, and I had told my cousin Jonathan, I was like, can you go up with me? And I remember him holding my hand, and when I was walking to the casket, my mom was kind of turning around, and she was just like, don't go look at him, like remember him from how he looks in this picture, because there was a picture right next to his casket. She was like, don't go look at him, don't go look at him. But like I felt like I needed to, you know what I mean? And I just remember like holding my cousin's hand, and then when I got up there, I just like squeezed his hand, and I just like, I couldn't believe how different he looked. He was in really bad shape. Obviously, you know, like imagine being crushed by a tree in a car, you know what I mean? Like obviously you're not gonna look good, you know what I mean? So yeah, it was a very hard day, but it was also a very beautiful day as well, to see how many people showed up for my dad and for us. And that was the day that I found out about having a god sister. So one of my cousins is actually my dad's goddaughter. And I was always like close to her. Like obviously she lived in Philadelphia, so it was only as close that we could be, you know, at the age that we were. But you know, every time we were together, like we would hang out. Like I loved hanging out with her. And that was the day that I found out that she was my god sister. And again, it was beautiful because it was the start of like a beautiful relationship between her and I, and it's a relationship that I really value. And so I try to be the type of person who like looks at the beautiful things and really shitty things. And so that's literally me right now, just trying to look at all the beautiful in like a really shitty day. So it built a bond between me and my cousin Jonathan, who like was there holding my hand and just like being in that really difficult moment with me. And then finding out that I had a god sister, and just like all the cousins and family members who showed up. Like I just remember my family, like especially my cousins, we kind of deal with trauma with like jokes and stuff, so there would definitely be times where, you know, I would kind of like sneak away and we would just be there joking, whatever, and sometimes I would feel bad like laughing. I was like, why am I laughing at my dad's funeral? But there's beauty in pain, you know what I mean? And that was the beauty in such a painful day and such a painful moment and experience. So yeah, so like I said, his funeral was like, there was so many people there. It was like packed a full day, and it was exhausting. Like imagine just being at a funeral for 12 plus hours. Kind of to wrap it up, his funeral, really hard day, and then it was the start of another week-long kind of funeral in the Dominican Republic. It was literally like, it was so intense. I've never been a part of something like that. Like it was a funeral to a whole nother level. Like it was just so crazy. I don't know if I necessarily would want anybody to experience something like that, because it was just like constantly like just reopening that wound and just a constant reminder that he was gone. It was extremely difficult, and it was just kind of the start of even more tragedy and more heartbreak, because the years to follow, there was just so much bad that happened, so much betrayal that happened. So I'm gonna go ahead and end out this video right here. If you guys want me to do a more story times where I kind of go a little bit more into everything that happened post my dad's death, make sure to let me know in the comments below. I will definitely do more story times like this. I just feel like videos like this could be very healing for some people, or it could just make some people feel, you know, less alone, or feel like, you know, they're not going through difficult moments by themselves. And so you guys can see an example of someone who has been through probably some of the worst things that some people can go through, but here I am, I've persevered, and even though I did really lose a big part of myself, I feel like slowly as I've grown up, I'm starting to kind of heal that inner child and just kind of get back to that little girl that once was. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I know it was a little bit of a heavier one, a little bit more emotional. I didn't think I was gonna get as emotional because it's been 15 years now. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you guys have any stories similar to this, make sure to comment them in the comments below so I can read them, and you know, let's just form a little bit of a community down in the comments. If you got to the end of this video, I love you so much, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.